I have a PhD in computer science. I have over a dozen papers published under my name, 4 of them as first author, and this video is for people who want to know what it's like to submit your first research paper to a conference. Back in 2022, when I published my first paper during my master's thesis, I had no idea on how research works. I just finished my bachelor's degree in computer science, and at the time, I didn't know anything about publishing your research paper, what the review process is, what topics there are to choose from. So in this video, I'm going to be walking you through exactly what I learned on publishing a research paper and what actually works, at least from my perspective of computer science. So your particular field may differ. So step 1 is choosing a topic. So the prerequisite of submitting a paper is hopefully you have some topic chosen. In computer science, there's so many different directions you can go. You can do machine learning, you could do high performance computing, you could do bioinformatics, you could do data visualization. So each of these respective conferences have only a certain set of topics that they publish papers on. So part of the challenge is actually trying to figure out which one of these conferences are right for you. So step 2 is choosing an organization. So now when it comes to publishing, not all conferences are created equal. Something my advisor taught me early on is that the reputation of the organization hosting the conference matters a lot. So in computer science, that's usually either ACM or IEEE. Those are 2 reputable sources when you want to publish a paper. And if you tell someone you've published under these 2 organizations, they'll instantly know that you've published in a reputable source, because these organizations usually have a full review process where experts are selected in the field who are actually re-critique your paper and give you feedback and so on. But on the other hand, there's conferences that they charge you to publish, and they don't even have a full review process. We can just pay a fee and then get it submitted into that conference. So step 3 is, once you've found the organization, now you have to pick a conference that fits your topic. So now that you've found an organization, and hopefully a reputable one, then the next step is to try and find a conference that fits your topic. So for me, I've always been interested in talking to computers and Jarvis, voice-activated AI. I looked for conferences in natural language processing, which is NLP. Basically, it's anything to do with how computers understand or process text or speech. That's how I found the conference on conversational user interfaces, which is part of the ACM organization, and it became the first target for me to submit my paper to. Step 4 is understanding the deadlines and submission phases. Now that you have these conferences picked out, the next thing you need to do is to keep track of the deadlines. So usually there's 2 deadlines that you need to keep track of. One of them is an abstract deadline, which is a submission of a short summary of your paper. And the second deadline is a full or short paper deadline, depending on which one you want to do. Usually the paper deadline is about a week after the abstract is due. The abstract helps the organization get a sense of what topics people are submitting, so they can group papers in the correct categories. Your abstract doesn't actually have to be perfect, but it should be close enough to what your paper is about. And if you don't already have most of your paper written by the abstract deadline, it's probably not a good idea to submit your paper because you won't have enough time. If your paper doesn't have a deadline published, we can just look at the prior years, and then you can get like an estimate of when the deadline is going to be, because usually they're around the same time of the year. Okay, so just a quick breakdown of what a full paper and a short paper is. So usually there's 2 types of submissions. One is a short paper, which may not have statistical findings, but has some early stage indications. Exploring this area further might have solid results in the future. These are usually a few pages long. A full paper, which is around 10 pages, has solid results and sense of moving the scientific needle forward on making a big contribution in the field. But also you want to keep in mind that a full paper might have strong contributions in the field where people behave in certain conditions, but you have to be careful not overstating your findings. Rarely in computer science or in any science, you want to claim cause and effect in scientific writing, because usually there's so many variables that can influence the results, especially in human studies. For example, I conducted a user study where I created a system and I invited people in to use the system, and then I had to observe them. Just to give you guys a sense, I'm picking people on this day where they might have some external factors going on. They might be nervous, they might be sick. They have these researchers behind them that are watching their every move, but it's not really a good representation of what they're like a regular setting. External factors can affect the user's behavior and skew your data. It might be a perfect scenario that they feel just fine. It might be a good representation, and so on. So you just need to be careful on not overstating your findings. And even other fields like high performance computing, where you're running simulations on real world conditions, like simulating the temperature, background processes, or network traffic, there's still some external factors in real life that can influence your results. So this can cause your experiments and your simulations to be different from what happens in practice. The context of how you're writing your paper and stating your findings matters a lot. Step 5 is the actual review process. So once you submitted your paper, there's usually a few experts, around 3 or 4 of them, who's going to be looking at your paper. Usually there's one main reviewer who is part of the conference and 2, 3, or 4 other reviewers who are selected or who volunteer in the field who are also experts, and they're going to be evaluating the research paper. So they'll rate your paper on a scale of 5, where 1 is a strong accept, where they didn't find any issues with it, they loved it, and they want to accept it into the conference. 2 is a weak accept, where they're leaning towards accepting your paper, but they don't feel strongly about it. 3 is they feel neutral, which they could be persuaded either way on. 4 is a weak reject, so they might see some promise in your paper, but it still has some issues. And 5 is a strong reject. When the reviewer gives you a strong reject, they usually has some major flaws with the paper that they don't want it to be published. And every conference has their own special review process, where maybe they need X number of strongly accepts in order for the paper to be published. Some might be a little bit more lenient on the review process, where if there's like a few people who accept the paper, then they'll accept your paper. And there's also a 6th option, which is for papers that don't meet the submission format. For example, if you leave your name in anonymous submission when you're not supposed to, then that could give you a desk reject, meaning they'll just reject your paper flat out. It doesn't even go through the review process because you can't even follow the directions that they gave you. So most ACM and IEEE conferences, they use in this anonymous review, meaning that the reviewers shouldn't know who you are and you don't know who they are. That's important because it prevents bias. If reviewers see a famous researcher like Ben Schneider, one of the top experts in the field of human-computer interaction, they might subconsciously feel more lenient on accepting your paper. So anonymous review helps keep this whole review process fair. Step 7, hopefully your paper is in the accept phase. There's revisions and acceptance. And after review process, which is typically a few months, you'll get some feedback and there's a few possible outcomes. One is that they'll accept the paper flat out. I never had a paper just fully accepted. There's usually some minor revisions that you have to do, and that's also one of the options here. So they could accept your paper with minor revisions, which is the most common outcome. This means that the reviewers like your paper overall, but they want a few things changed. There's some grammar mistakes. They want you to reorganize some sections or clarify some of your results or run some little experiments just to confirm some of the things that you are finding. So once your paper is accepted with minor revisions, you'll make the changes that they told you to do, and then you'll submit a short response explaining to the main reviewer, who will double check that you actually made those changes, and that's it. If your paper is an accept with minor revisions, you'll make those changes, you'll submit the paper with a short response of everything that you fixed, and then the main reviewer will double check it. 3 is a plain reject, meaning the reviewers didn't think that the paper met the standards, had major issues, or didn't have any significant results. So if your paper is accepted, usually after minor revisions, congratulations, it gets published in the conference proceedings and presented at the conference. That's basically the full process of submitting a paper, from picking a topic, picking a reputable conference, writing and submitting your paper, going through the review process, and finally getting accepted. If you guys found this video helpful, let me know in the comments. I'm thinking about doing a follow-up video where I'm breaking down how to review a research paper and what reviewers actually look for. If that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for the next video.